Thank you. The aspect, we're supposed to be talking about depression on this particular. And depression is often due to a combination of two major factors. It has to do with brain biochemistry and brain pathways, which would be another way of talking about thoughts. And in regards to the biochemistry, this is what every pharmaceutical company in America is trying to work through is the synapse. So there's little receptors on a receiving nerve. And this area is called the synapse. There are little vesicles in here that are filled with, let's call this serotonin. And when it gets close and there's an electrical signal that comes through here, this vesicle releases the serotonin into this synapse. And when it binds on to the receptor, then this electrical signal occurs. And this is how communication occurs in the brain. But after that synapse occurs, there's a reuptake channel, and this serotonin will be released and brought back in here again so that it can go back to and have another vesicle formed with serotonin. We call this the reuptake channel. And this is because it takes about 1 billion ATP molecules. ATP is the energy-producing aspect of our brain biochemistry. And it takes about 1 billion ATP molecules to make one of those serotonin molecules. Now, we can't get 95% of the serotonin in the body is made by the gut, the GI tract. And I'm also do gastroenterology. In fact, that's how I know how serotonin's made and all of this. I had to learn about all of that because serotonin is very important for the GI tract. But if you make serotonin in your GI tract, which we all do, that doesn't help us in the brain at all because serotonin does not cross the blood-brain barrier. It's too large to get through to the brain. The brain has different circulation. It can get in any other portion of your body, it can go through those arteries and it can get to those organs, but not the brain because the brain is the most protected organ so that toxins don't destroy all of our neurons. Our neurons are very sensitive and the oldest cells of your body are actually in your brain. The cells that were there when you were formed in utero are still there and working. And the nervous system is the first area of the brain, or the first area of the body that's formed after conception. And so that blood-brain barrier is there to protect us. It's also, I don't know that we'll be talking about this, I'm only giving 11 talks, but our brains are not meant to deteriorate with age. The rest of our body is going to deteriorate with age. It's part of that aging process. We will get less mitochondria in the rest of our body. But the mitochondria in our brain are not designed to deteriorate with age. if we're protecting that brain well. So our brain, in fact, the way it's supposed to work is the way a good friend of mine, he just turned 100 years of age. And he's still walking, by the way, still no cane, no walker. He drives himself everywhere. He actually flies internationally all by himself, and he gives health talks. He's a physician who's also a Harvard-trained nutritionist, and his brain is as sharp as can be. He remembers everything, including the recent things. And he'll talk about the latest scientific research. He actually talked at our EQ Summit, Dr. John Scharfenberg, and he has a great sense of humor. By the way, he might come to Australia here. Maybe I don't know if Katie stepped out, but maybe she should know about him. But he's full of brain energy. Obviously, he doesn't have the physical energy that he used to have, but he's full of brain energy. And if our brain is working well and we continue to treat it well, our brains can be phenomenal even into older age. But back to this issue of serotonin. If we don't have enough serotonin, we are going to have some symptoms. Lack of serotonin synapse or synaptic activity. We're going to tend to have sadness. It can even get to the point of hopelessness. We're also going to tend to be more irritable. We're going to start to have sleep problems, not sleeping as well or restoratively, because serotonin then turns into melatonin at night, which can help us sleep. We can even start to get into feelings of worthlessness. We can get into morbid thoughts. And it will also decrease our creativity. It will also decrease our empathy for others. We tend to become more self-focused. And so how does the world treat this when we don't have enough serotonin being made by these cells? The neurons have to make serotonin. We all have manufacturing plants for serotonin in our brain. And if those manufacturing plants aren't working right, we are going to tend to run into these types of issues. And so when your doctor recognizes that you're having crying spells, or you're more irritable, or even more anxious, you can get to the point of even panic disorder as a result of lack of serotonin. The doctor is not going to give you anything that helps you make more serotonin. Nor is the doctor going to give you anything that's going to help you build up more of those receptors to bind onto serotonin. What he's going to do is give you a medicine that he's going to tell you will enhance your serotonin synapse. And that medicine works by coming in here. It looks like serotonin, but it has a big fat tail on it. And when the serotonin tries to get vacuum back up in there, it plugs that vacuum cleaner. Now, we really should call it serotonin vacuum cleaner plugger, but that's not a very good marketing tool. So instead, it's called a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It's abbreviated SSRI. Now, how that works is, if you don't have enough serotonin in this synapse and the vacuum cleaner is plugged, there's more serotonin staying in here, and so it can bind onto that receptor. So it does seem to work. Now, it won't work right away. It takes about a week to start plugging those channels up, and about a month before you get a statistically significant difference in your serotonin synaptic activity. But when we don't get it vacuumed back up, we are shorting the neuron of the very substance that it was already short of. And that's why they needed the drug to begin with. And so within 9 months or a year of plugging those channels, we have the same issue. Not enough serotonin in that synapse. So the patient's going back to the doctor and saying, my symptoms are all back. What does the doctor do? He increases the dose or adds another medicine. And so by the time they get to us, they're usually on 4 different medicines, severely depressed, and no one looked at, why isn't this neuron making enough serotonin to begin with? Was it because they didn't have enough tryptophan, an amino acid that we need to be able to make serotonin? Is it because there's not enough of the B vitamins? You need folate, you need B12, you need magnesium. Is it because they weren't getting tryptophan with the carbs? They were eating tryptophan from turkey and meat that's high in protein, high in fat, but not enough carbs. We have to have carbohydrates plus tryptophan to get it across the blood-brain barrier. Tryptophan itself won't even cross the blood-brain barrier unless we have carbs with it. That's why the tryptophan in turkey has been shown not to help the brain. It can help your muscle, but it doesn't help your brain. Is it because the person is not getting enough exercise? It turns out tryptophan is the least abundant amino acid in the diet. And there are 5 other amino acids that bind onto the same receptor. And if we're not exercising, those amino acids will come across the brain instead of tryptophan. If we exercise, those amino acids are taken up by our muscles, and then we have better tryptophan ratio to get it across the blood-brain barrier. So there's a number of factors. Another thing that can happen is, are we getting enough light? It turns out light through the eyes actually flips a switch in our serotonin manufacturing plant to produce more serotonin. And indoor light is not bright enough. We need outdoor light. This is one of the reasons why as well we talked about distractions going way up as a result of our electronic devices. But the other thing that went way down during COVID is people were not outside. You know, at Weimar University, we have 15 miles of trails in the foothills of the Sierra Mountains there. And all the trails that were publicly operated shut down when the COVID pandemic started. The national park shut down. Yosemite, can't go to Yosemite. Can't go to a simple trail that's a beautiful trail just a few miles from Weimar. Warning, COVID. Don't go on this trail. And you might run into somebody else who has it, and you could die. At Weimar, we did not close our trails. We told the public, come onto our trails. This is actually going to be good for you. And it turns out that getting enough light actually does help us to be able to make more serotonin. And so when we start treating the underlying problem, we don't get side effects. The side effects of the SSRIs, now they can help the mood, they can help some things. And as a physician, I might even use it short term while I'm fixing the underlying issue of why we're not getting it. But the SSRIs are going to make one of the symptoms of depression worse. Actually, 2 of the symptoms. Apathy. The apathy is this I don't care attitude. This is why SSRIs do not improve function. They can improve mood, but they won't improve your work productivity, and they won't necessarily improve your family productivity. Now, some people like this Because if they have crying spells and they no longer care, they quit crying. I took that drug and my crying spells are gone. But we've had many people say, I lost my spouse while taking this drug, and I knew I should have felt sad, but I felt like I couldn't even cry at the funeral. Why? The I don't care attitude, that apathy came up. But that means you don't have the joys in life. The things that should cause you joys, you're blunted in regards to that. It also worsens impulsivity. And this is why these drugs all have big, giant black box warnings. What are those black box warnings when you read them? What do they increase the risk of? Suicide. What? We're giving something that's supposed to help depression and it worsens suicide? Yes, it does. Because it worsens impulsivity before it improves the mood. And if you have someone who's depressed and thinking about ending their life, and now you've made them impulsive, and their mood hasn't improved yet, there's a lot of suicides that occur the first month after starting to take these drugs. And how do you weigh that side effect? You really need to be monitoring the patient closely if they're even thinking about those sorts of things when they have depression, because it could actually induce that sort of thing. But when we take care of it, say it's a tryptophan shortage or a tryptophan carb or folate shortage, when we take care of that, we only see benefits. This all goes away, and this also gets better. In other words, they want to do things. They're more motivated. And to make a depressed person less motivated in order to improve the mood is not necessarily the best treatment. And so what we are looking for is the actual underlying cause of what's producing this brain biochemical issue. Now, I don't know if we can, might be able to put this aside for now so they can see the other screen there. There are over 100 different causes of depression. And we've categorized them into 10 categories, and we have found out the brain's pretty resilient. It can handle one categorical cause, it can handle two, it can handle three, but once you get to 4 different categorical causes, of which one of them might be smartphone usage. And if you have a genetic now trait of undermethylation, which makes it more challenging for you to make serotonin, and you have a developmental hit has to do with what happened in your childhood that might have affected your brain. Then you're already at 3 hits, and then if you have not that good of a diet, boom, you're there. Or if you're not exercising, boom, you're there. Or if you're having your circadian rhythm all over the place, where you're not sleeping at regular times, and you're not sleeping at the times to be able to make enough melatonin, you're there. And so 4 different hit categories. And so we can start backing up those hits and making a significant difference. But I wanted to get to the developmental hit as well, because that helps us to finish the presentation that we were going to finish earlier. Adverse childhood experiences. There are 3 different major aspects of adverse childhood experiences that have been increasing in our society today. 1 is neglect, 2 is abuse, and 3 is kids being raised by parents who have a significant addiction. We talked to you about how addictions are at an all-time high. But abuse and neglect of our young people also are at an all-time high. And one of the things that, when we look at this long-term, our countries and the politics tend to look at things very short-term. And I don't know if you know in America, but in America, there's this big thing about, abortion, et cetera. We wouldn't have the abortion argument if we didn't have a casual sex issue. And casual sex, by definition, are by people who are not willing to take an oath before intimacy until death do us part, in sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer. Do you guys take oaths like that when you go to a marriage vow? When you are taking that oath, you are essentially committing yourself to self-sacrificing love for each other. And when you commit to self-sacrificing love to each other and you have a child, you're far more likely to be self-sacrificing in the love for that child. If you have a child under casual sex, you're far more likely that that's a self-centered act. It's not a selfless act. And you're far more likely to exhibit selfishness in raising that child. What does that mean? You're more likely to neglect them if your needs come above their needs in your mind. You're more likely to abuse them if you get irritated with them, etc. And so what we are seeing as a result of the marked increase in casual sex that has occurred throughout the world is a marked increase in adverse childhood experiences. And these adverse childhood experiences cause what we call attachment disorders. They have issues in regards to healthy emotional attachments. Now, the good news is that doesn't have to define them for life. If they can come across caring people who are self-sacrificing, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a teacher, maybe it's others, maybe it's an aunt or uncle, maybe it's not until they come through our program. Often they don't come across those people till they come through our program and they say, wow, your staff is so loving. We thought they were fake at first, but they're so compassionate and so loving. And I've never been around a group of people like this. And then they can start their healing process in regards to these many developmental hits. 91% of those who don't have a good relationship with their mother or father will have a significant disease by the time they're age 50. It's not 100%, there's 9%, and I can tell you in those 9% it has to do with something we just mentioned, where they hooked up with someone else that was healthy, that they could have a good relationship with. They have a good relationship with one, but not the other, 50% chance. Their lowest risk, however, by far, is if they have a good relationship with mom and dad. These people are going to be healthy in general. We've also tended to neglect as far as having a loving, authoritative father in our life. Not just a loving father, but what else? An authoritative father. Higher chance of being an A student by far if you were raised by a father like that. You'll have a higher IQ. You'll be a better problem solver. You're going to more likely enjoy school and be engaged. You'll have higher economic and educational achievement. You'll be better able to handle strange situations. You'll be more resilient in handling stress, more curious in exploring, and significantly less depression. And life satisfaction will go up. They've also looked at success at work, far more likely to be successful at work. You'll be more trusting, you'll be more friendlier, you'll be more socially accepted, you'll be more popular. Higher conformity to rules. Those that are always breaking the rules, often it's due to the fact that they didn't have that loving, authoritative father in their life. They'll more likely have long-term successful marriages, have more long-term close friends, have higher empathy for others, higher moral values. Notice this, 80% less likely to be in jail. That's significant. 75% less likely to become an unwed parent and better physical health. Now, I understand that sometimes it's best that they not be around a father that doesn't have those attributes or is addicted to meth or whatever, or alcohol, etc. But we sometimes underestimate the importance of having that healthy two-parent home. And so every time for myself, every time I see a defense and a political argument for casual sex, I'm thinking those people don't realize they are arguing for an increase of all of these problems that result from not having a healthy, self-sacrificing two-parent home. And they don't realize it. I understand they're very short-sighted and they don't realize it. They want to do what they want to do. But I think that's part of the education of the public that we need to give on this. That was, intimacy is obviously best in the setting where people are willing to take that type of oath. So behaviors that improve EQ, or emotional intelligence. Physical exercise, I've talked about that. Physical exercise to achieve fitness is key. It improves both the neurotransmitter receptor and release. It improves your cognitive function. It'll improve your mood, and it also improves your memory. Junk food, however, is linked to lower IQ and lower EQ. Study of children, since we were focusing in on children, controlled for known factors that affect IQ, and the 20% with the highest processed diet, higher in fats and sugar, 5-point lower IQ compared with the 20% who ate a more health-conscious diet with more what? Fruits, vegetables, salad, pasta, rice. These are your healthy carbs that are going to have tryptophan in them as well and help us with the serotonin. But other influences on emotional intelligence, notice the genetic makeup. That's one of the 10 categories we look at, the genetic makeup. Now, when people come to our residential program, we will actually not only see what genes they have, but if those genes are active. What we have found out is genetics loads the gun, but it's lifestyle and nutrition that pulls the trigger. And so you might have a gene for undermethylation, and it might be active. But if we put you on a healthy diet, good exercise, and light therapy, and in some people that have the gene from both mom and dad, they might need a supplement such as S-adenosylmethionine or saffron or both, and they will completely normalize, and we'll be able to measure 6 weeks later that that mutated gene has been totally shut down. They've got the gene for depression on both sides of the family, but it's not active in them. And so that's critically important to know that for those that are suffering to that degree. So that's why when they come to our program, it's their last stop, because we want to have every stone unturned to be able to see exactly what is going on there. But the major influence on emotional intelligence is our beliefs, our evaluation of events, the way we think about problems, and our silent self-talk. These are the moment-by-moment thoughts that we tell ourselves. Your feelings result from the messages you give yourself. Your thoughts have much more to do with how you feel than what is actually happening in your life. Now, we could take the ancient example of Paul and Silas to demonstrate this. Paul and Silas were in the Grecian coastal city of Philippi, and they were doing a lot of good things there. In fact, they were doing so many good things that it was changing the economy. Watch out when you're doing so many good things that it starts changing the economy. How was it changing? Alcohol use, going down considerably. The people that were selling the frontal lobe suppressants in order to make money are often connected to government officials. I don't know if you've noticed that here in Australia, but in the United States, if you want to suppress someone's frontal lobe legally and continue to make money off of that, you've got to have government connections. And so these guys who were losing money because of the enhancement of society started to decide that Paul and Silas shouldn't be there anymore. And so they campaigned the authorities, and they took them and actually publicly beat them with rods. They were thrust in prison. They were not put on a nice floor like this, but an irregular dirt floor with rocks in it. Their feet were put up in stocks, and there they were crying uncontrollably in prison and saying, "Why us, Lord?" Some of you are familiar with the story. The first part of the story is true. The last part I told you is not true. What were they doing? They had happy looks on their faces, singing praises to God. How can that be the case? Because their thoughts had much more to do with how they were what? Feeling than what was what? Actually happening in their life. By the way, they're great examples of high emotional intelligence. Most people would have just sit there and lashed out, maybe cursed at the people, said, you're not even following the laws of your land, which they weren't following the laws right at all. Here they were beating them without a trial or anything like that, and it was approved by the public officials, and the cruelty that was there in jail. But instead, they were so emotionally intelligent that even under the most adverse circumstances, their emotions were managed. And then when an earthquake occurred and the prison was let open, the jailer was going to kill himself. It was an averted suicide. And Paul said, "No, don't do it. We've kept all the prisoners here. Don't worry, you're not going to lose your life." And then that prison guard was so amazed because he had heard what Paul and Silas were doing all the way through the night and how their emotions were managed and singing praises to God and all of that, that he wanted what they had. And he says, "What must I do to be saved?" And not only was a suicide averted, his life was greatly enhanced. And then the authorities told the jailer, "Just let them go." And Paul and Silas says, "No, we're not going. You approved all this. You need to come down here yourself and let us go." And again, an emotionally intelligent move. But if our thoughts are that powerful, that even under the most adverse circumstances, we can have managed emotions, that tells you how critical it is for us to be thinking true and accurate thoughts. So we teach this through the ABCs of what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. Traditional therapy just teaches you that your activating event causes your emotional consequences. So you are just a victim of what has happened to you. And Dr. Ellis states very clearly, believing that we have little or no ability to influence our feelings and that events and situations directly cause our emotions and behavior is crooked thinking. So straight thinking is where we have the activating event, then the belief about that, and if the belief is accurate and rational and helpful, it will greatly improve the emotional consequence, or the C. We can't do anything about your previous activating events, but we can do something about your present Bs. And that's why we can help people even with severe developmental hits. Those were activating events, but now we can do something about their present Bs. Those activating events tend to lead to irrational thoughts, unhelpful thoughts, etc., doom and gloom thoughts, where you think you have no ability to be able to manage anything. So the Pacific Judicial Council, this is a council in the U.S. territories in the Pacific Islands. You've probably heard of Guam and some of these Pacific Islands. We call it Micronesia, Pohnpei, and Palau, and there's about 10 different islands, Chute, and CNMR, and particularly Guam is the largest of them. They heard about our Emotional Intelligence Summit that we were having every year at Weimar University, and many, or I should say some of the authorities in Guam had been attending this. And when their rates of addictions and rates of violence and those things went up, Chief Judge Francis Gatewood, who's appointed by a presidential appointee, invited us to speak to educators, legislatures, and the executive and judicial branches of the government. And they were all there. They actually shut down the court system except for emergency cases for the days I was there, and the Supreme Court Justice was there, and the judges, the Speaker of the legislature, the governor, those sorts of things. And they decided that they wanted to support the development of an emotional intelligence curriculum in children, age 6 through age 17 or 18, which is the K through 12 or first grade through 12 system. As you know, governments have a lot to say about those because it's the public school. And so public schools are what they had asked me to develop the curriculum for. They didn't have the money in Guam, but the federal government has money through the Ninth Circuit. And there's multiple circuits of the federal court system depending on the region of the United States. So the Ninth Circuit is over California, Arizona, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands. And so they got money from the Ninth Circuit, who agreed to help us to develop this curriculum. And of course, there's separation of church and state in the United States. And so they asked me, do you work at all or get paid at all by your church? And of course, we answered no, not at all, not even 1%. And then they asked if Weimar University, where I'm president, is owned by the church, even a small amount, 1%. And we said no, Weimar University is completely separate as far as the church economically is concerned. It's called a self-supporting ministry, not a church-supported ministry. And with those two answers, they said, then we can stick to the separation of church and state, and you can develop the curriculum. And so they had us develop this curriculum. And since emotional intelligence is learned, they said, what about teaching it to pre-K through grade 12 as we would math or social studies, and have it to be there. They wanted it to be comprehensive, interesting, interactive, and engaging. And so our pilot curriculum, which we did just 2 years ago, we piloted it for grades 2, 5, and 9. Now, those grades, we also had the parents sign off on it. It was called outreach, so the parents were told about this curriculum ahead of time and see if they wanted their kid, if it was accessible to their kid, if they wanted their kid. No parent turned it down. They all wanted this. And the parents were also learning some things about it. In fact, the first unit that we teach is brain anatomy and physiology. We have found out even first graders and second graders can learn about their brain anatomy and physiology, and they're very thrilled to do so, and to even learn the terms and how it works and things. And we heard a story of a father of a second grader losing his temper in the home and lashing out, and the second grade girl is watching this. And after it occurs, she says, I think Dad allowed his amygdala to overpower his frontal lobe. And Dad heard that, and he remembered she was learning that curriculum. So he started studying what she was studying as well to try to help his own emotional intelligence. Unit 2 is comprehensive brain health. We teach them how to be able to make these neurotransmitters in their brain through nice changes in their diet and exercise and other things. And then Unit 3, we go right into emotional intelligence, what it is and how to enhance it. And then we don't call them cognitive distortions for these age groups. We call them thinking errors. And they learn the 10 different categories of thinking errors, and they love doing this, and also how to correct those thinking errors. And then, of course, they did before and after studies, and they found so many positive effects in just 10 weeks in these kids, as well as in their families. Many teachers who had taught in elementary school and high school for years said this is the first class that we would teach where the students would get upset because the class was over. Teacher, it's over with already? Can't we learn more? And then they'd ask, what are we going to learn about tomorrow? And one of the teachers was a math teacher and said, we've had kids love math, but they've never asked, what math are we going to learn about tomorrow? And they're just very excited about this class. We even teach them about music that can enhance their emotional intelligence. And so they play music at the beginning of the class that can help. And about halfway through, one of the teachers had the player break, and the kids didn't like that. Teacher, that music is helping us. You know, we want to hear that music. And of course, some of them didn't even know that it was music at first because they haven't been listening to healthy music. So when they listened to healthy music, they would even ask, teacher, is that music? We haven't heard music like that before. Teaching this class, one of the teachers said, has saved my marriage. This was a 5th grade teacher. And he said he and his wife were splitting up and he didn't understand all the reasons, but they had significant issues. And he said, I realized halfway through teaching this course that I was getting a divorce due to my own lack of emotional intelligence. So I started to apply the principles I was teaching. And he says, my marriage has been saved. And my wife is so happy. One of the teachers, many of these islands are religious, primarily the Catholic religion, but one of the teachers stated, this course, I think, is more important to our children than religion. And she says, let me explain. Religion teaches us what we must do before we die to go to heaven. But death seems like a long ways off to these kids. And this course teaches us how we can have heaven on earth right now. So the parents were excited about what they were seeing in their own children. Their children were now helping them with work at home. We also teach them the advantages of working in 3 dimensions, expressing gratitude. They were controlling their emotions better. One of the high school girls got transferred to another high school. Actually, it was her 3rd high school she got transferred to because she would beat up her classmates whenever she got upset at them. And so now they had her in a 3rd school, and she was selected to be part of this curriculum. And about 8 weeks into the curriculum, the teacher at recess saw another student knock her down, get angry at her, and knocked her down to the ground. Now, this was a pretty big, strong girl. That's why she was also able to beat up other girls. And so they saw her get right back up and thought, uh-oh, what are we going to see now? And this girl looked at the girl that had just shoved her down and then turned around and walked away. And the teacher said, we knew about your history, and why did you just turn around and walk away? And she says, it's that EQ curriculum. So we could go over a number of other comments, but Obviously, the students, the changes in the students then encouraged Guam and everyone. They want this to be part of the regular curriculum all the way through K through 12. So right now we're developing it for every grade and advancing on that. And the curriculum has helped them in a lot of different ways, including enjoying exercise, eating healthier, and correcting their thoughts for distortions, and able to manage their emotions and be more motivated. And that took place in just 10 weeks. And so we shouldn't just put up with depression and anxiety and mental health issues as if it's the norm. These things don't have to occur, and if they do occur, they can be reversed. And they can also be largely prevented. I'm encouraged that this is developed in the public school system. They're learning all of the positive things about nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, managing their emotions. And it makes a huge difference. And it also opens their mind up in regards to their frontal lobe of being able to learn even deeper things more solidly. So it is time for completion. I will open it up for questions and answers in a little bit. But I know in this community, a community depression and anxiety recovery program has also been run and will be run in the future that is based on our materials. We have developed, in fact, there's a whole new, we've updated it several times, but there's a whole new update with the latest science on regards to depression and anxiety recovery. And this is a mental health education program, meaning that everyone can go to it and learn about it, whether they have depression or anxiety or not. It's so common that you have to know someone in your life with depression and anxiety if you don't have it yourself. And this mental health education program has actually been shown to be superior to taking any traditional approaches, which is the traditional pharmaceuticals and traditional counseling. And it's been now used in 5 different continents. If you need actually medical therapy support, we've had many Australians come through our residential program where they have not been able to participate in that and learn about all their biochemistry and get the professional help. But most people can actually get significantly better with just the mental health education program. So